Welcome. So we're here. We're back again. Welcome, Doug Scott Kramer, for more. Well, now we're going to get right on Danny Masterson's mistrial. Um, for those of you in the chat, some of you know the last time we talked about this was a week ago during the break. We did a Q&A and just kept everybody up to date. There is a playlist listed below for every episode, for every witness, and everything that happened day by day. Every couple of days I did one listing everything. Most of the reporting come from Deadline, Variety, the AP, the amazing Tony Ortega. Let's just give credit where credit's due. He reported those conversations word for word, gave me the hooks I needed to think about it and to see what was going on inside that courtroom. And I commend him for his dedication, for flying back and forth, even during the break, and getting stared at by Scientologists on a regular basis while he's sitting there had to be a little uncomfortable for him, but he deserves a lot of credit for that work. And we all, right, Doug? I mean, even yourself,
Absolutely.
this is the information we needed because it was a closed courtroom, no cameras, only a few reporters allowed in. It was a
Mhm.
little looser towards the end, but in the beginning there was only one or two slots, and Tony was one of them. So we
Mhm.
got every single day because of his dedication. And
Yeah, and that
yeah.
took courage because I gotta tell you, I knew some of those people, and I was just thinking if I was in that courtroom, I'd feel very uncomfortable, but you know what? Tony's not only not uncomfortable, he looks like he's having a good time, and all those videos he puts out, he's smiling, he's, like, having the
He's so
time of his life. It's like, "Fuck,
he
dude." He's
is.
not
It
intimidated.
he's not intimidated at all. I give him a lot of
Mhm.
credit. He's just rolling with it. It's
Yeah.
pretty cool. It's definitely pretty cool. But, here's the thing. Now, I've been getting a lot of DMs because of the
Mhm.
result, and I even hesitated to come out and speak on it because it's gonna be humorous to the people that know me, but I actually had no words about this. I had no words right away. I was silent. I was stunned. I was
Wow.
quiet. The people I dealt with in the last couple of days would say, "What's wrong with like Claire? She's not talking. Like Claire's not
Wow.
talking. What's wrong?" Well, it's not that I was shook or that I should have actually expected it. You know what I mean? Because there are
Why?
multiple
Why do you
people
say
on a
that?
jury. Why
Mhm.
do I say that?
Mhm.
Um Because there's several things. I'm a common sense kind of person, and the reason I
Mhm.
started following this, not only for the Scientology hook, because I knew they were going to throw paper at this and try to get rid of it like crazy, but it was the
Mhm.
first criminal case that was out there, and I didn't think they were going to be able to get rid of it, and I wanted to see that play out. Also, the hook of the statute of limitations, what they had to do to actually get this case to come forward because of the length of time between it, and also because of the lines of consent, the very real issue of the real legal definition of what sexual assault was, which is penetration without consent, period. Okay. And and then the fact that they were in relationships, that the lines were being blurred by the other organization and even by the statute of limitations in some ways, and that the fact that they were sleeping, which there's big studies which I've linked below for you guys, on this. One of the hooks that it was the fact that when is consent, you're in a private relationship with someone, and of course you're sleeping in the same bed and you're consensual sex on this day and that day, but when is consent not consent? Where are the lines of it? What is the comfortable reasoning? It's not that I was sticking up for Danny Masterson, because when I heard the stories, of course, I could not, in the way things are being portrayed, that they happened. And I'm going to be biased about that, because the way that they say it happened, it is clear to me that he knew there was no consent. However, did he feel prior to that that there might have been? Of course. And I can understand a man's point of view on this. I have brothers, I have friends. I understand the issue clearly, that it is not a black and white situation. But
Mhm.
no does mean no whenever you say it.
Mhm.
We can't take that away. So, like, for me, that was it. But so that was too confusing, I think, for them.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
I
don't
think
want
you're
to
right.
say that I don't want to say that they're not intelligent, because obviously they are. But there were too many components of it.
You're right,
And
you're right.
and also Philip Cohen was able to hammer on that. And he one statement that he made that I will never forget. and I have repeated this to just everybody who talked to me about this trial, and he said it again in his closing arguments, and he said it again in his statement about the mistrial. He said, if Danny Masterson believes there was consent, you can't find him guilty.
If Danny Masterson believes there was consent. Wow. What a statement that is, by the way.
That is quite a narrow statement. That just
Mhm.
takes away the rights of every victim
I
everywhere.
know, right? That's a
Mhm.
completely incorrect statement
And
because
I'm
as you
like,
just said, it's the
and I would have
gals.
said, I would have tried to give him grace because I always do. People that watch my show know I hammer on Philip Cohen for trying to go at these women in California where the protection laws on how you're supposed to address a victim on that stand are quite clear. And he tried to cross that line a lot. And Judge Almeida, to her great defense, pushed him back every time. But he kept
Yeah.
coming. He
Yep.
knew he wanted to discredit them and this, and say that. But he
Mhm.
only, he could only go so far because of the legal protections without
Mhm.
getting sanctioned. But he tried. And I actually abhor him for that because he knows that that law is there for a reason. And he
Mhm.
knows there were other things that he could have went on. The timeline, the lack of memory, this, that, and the other thing. But no, he chose to discredit them and just call them, okay, you didn't like the sex, so therefore it was against your will. Basically, that's the line he went with.
Mhm. I think you're
You know
totally right, by the way. There's so much smoke and mirrors, and there's so many elements to it about the how much time had passed, and as
Mhm,
and then the defense was just trying to basically say, hey, what you said in court today was different than the reports in 2017, for example, on one of the Jane Does, and trying to despite all the elements, though, one of the things that trips me out is only 3 of these cases were able to be brought in. They were gonna
mhm,
originally try to bring in 5, and as you know,
yep,
they have to get 2 of they have to have at least 2 convictions in order to send him to prison. But this
mhm,
guy has a whole history of what you call a serial rapist, because there was other allegations too that simply were not brought into court. And then the other
mhm,
element is he was clearly, in my opinion, drugging these people, doing a whole roofie
mhm,
type thing. So
mhm,
the elements, his past track record, the amount of victims there seem to be, all alleged, because they haven't been proven, and then his method, which appears to be drugging them, and then also, a gun being held against one of the Jane Does. They were clearly in an
right,
abusive relationship with Danny, even though they were, part of him being protected is to have her be the girlfriend so he can
mhm,
abuse them and rape them. So I do believe, of course, you can be raped in a relationship, but there's so many different elements to the case. I think they were able to create doubt. And just to let
they
your
were.
audience know
Mhm,
real quick what the results were in case anybody isn't up to
mhm,
speed, it says the jury had told Judge Almeida that they had tried and tried, but were unable to unanimous verdicts. And here's the breakdown real quick. Jane Doe number 2 for guilty and 10 for not guilty. And then on count 2, this is Jane Doe number 2, 4 for guilty, 8 not guilty. And Jane Doe number 3, 5 for guilty, 7 not guilty. So even though they're going to
mhm.
retry this on March 27th of 2023, they
It's a
have an
hill.
uphill battle just with those
Mhm,
results. And I think you're right. It's because of so many
mhm.
elements that the jury simply couldn't come to a unanimous guilty verdict. Don't you think?
I do, but I do think they have the benefit of knowing because they did get to
Mm,
go into the room and talk to the jury as they both came out with their statements. Mueller's statement, with his partner, as chair second, were very close-lipped about anything that was said, but they did say that they did not hear anything from the jury that they didn't already see and expect. Okay,
mm,
they were already going on closing the loopholes in the statements. They did
mhm.
actually bring a memory witness, Mindy
Right.
Mechanic coming out as a memory witness, as somebody with assault, to say it's not uncommon for you
Yeah.
to forget little tiny things and then remember them and bring back. But when you look at the consistency in their stories in general, it's solid. And she did a
Yeah,
lot of credit
exactly.
that way.
She was
They
really
also
good, by the way. I thought she did a
she
damn
was.
good job of explaining that.
She
And by the way, as a quote unquote abuse survivor, I could relate exactly to what she was talking about.
Mhm. Many people in my chat that have had similar situations,
Mhm.
not so far as against their will, but in narcissistic relationships, toxic relationships, some kind of abuse of some nature, said the same thing, that she was spot on about all of
Yep.
that and it
That's yep.
resonated with them. And I think
Mhm.
that was one of the main reasons that remember, there were three expert witnesses on the witness list for the defense, and nobody showed up. Nobody came. They
Yeah,
decided not to call anybody to go against Mindy
I
Mechanic.
know.
Okay,
Which is a clever
so
defense strategy because they just wanted to hang the women and create enough doubt. And if Danny and associates would get on the stand, they
mhm.
would have just opened up a can of
They
worms, I
didn't
feel.
even bring in his assistant to counter anything
I
that
know.
January 1 or 2 said about that.
I
And
know.
that was very odd to me. It was almost like, well, they would just went on the doubt. But when he went up there,
Exactly.
what really I knew we were in trouble when the first thing the jury wanted to see was from closing statements of Philip Cohen, put the degrees of guilt up there. So basically, what he was saying is, unless you think he's the most vile person on the earth and that he tied them up, held a knife to their throat, and raped them, he's not guilty. He literally laid it out, the degrees of
Mhm.
guilt on a chart, on like how far is this and how
Yeah.
bad is that, and like is that
Yeah.
really like this, like playing with the words, turning it out.
Yeah.
And when they wanted to see that, although they can't because closing statements are not evidence, they're just opinion.
Mhm.
Let us remember that the only thing the jury is allowed to consider is
Testimony.
true
Yeah.
evidence and testimony.
Mhm.
Okay. But the first thing they wanted to see was the bells and whistles that Philip Cohen put out there.
Interesting.
So I do believe he did a good job for his defending.
Mhm.
He needs to. I
Yeah.
cannot say bad for the man. I lost a little bit of respect about the attacking on the women, but then again, like that's what kind
That's
of
his job.
that's his job, and that's
Mhm.
what he's gonna do.
Yep.
Okay, but when he said, I do think he's a little moronic to go at the judge a bit about a mistrial every 15 minutes. Well, that's an
Scientology's
exaggeration.
probably putting him up to that. He has to
Yes,
make an
yes,
objection every 2 seconds. I think, Scientology perhaps whispering in his
yes.
ear. I
But how dumb does he think we are when he says Scientology was mentioned 700 times? And I'm like, yup, Philip, and you were 650 of them. I can guarantee.
I
Because
remember when
every
Leah
day.
remember when Leah Remini tweeted out that whole tweet
Yes.
too? He tried to get a mistrial on that. He
He
tried to
tried to get
throw a mistrial on
everything they
everything.
did.
Yeah.
So he brought it in every single day. He brought Scientology into that
Yeah.
case. He
Yeah.
or Goldstein, Karen Goldstein, his second chair, every
Mhm.
single day they brought it in. Every state they brought the mayor's race in. They mentioned the
Yeah.
word Scientology, and Judge Almeida's like, and like I could just see her. She could have been like, I know she's in California, but she could have been from Jersey because I could
Yeah,
just see her
she
face.
is. She
She's
has an
like,
East
she's
Coast
like,
vibe. She doesn't put up with
yeah,
any shit. She's a good
she was
judge.
like, "And that is
Yeah.
like, what? Did you?" And she a couple of times she actually said, "Did you actually just say that?" Like, and I was like, I could just see her head tilted. I wish I was there because, like, I could
I
just
wish
see
I
like the
was
head
too.
tilt. Like, did you actually just say that, dude? Like, really? And then he tried to say that they shouldn't
He
have been on break
I was
and
just
that
gonna
she had
say
no
that. He
business.
actually
And she
called her
pulls
a
the
liar,
testimony.
basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he goes, "I didn't call you a liar." She goes, "Well, let me be
Yeah.
clear that you actually did infer that I
Yeah.
was lying and there
I
is no
know.
testimony. So we're going to take the time to show you that he was, because we're not having that." Like she was
Yeah.
like, we're not having that. You might pull that with your fancy words and make people think stuff with somebody else, but you're not doing it to me. Like,
Yeah.
here's the facts, Jack. Like, here's all the testimony. Here's what they told the clerk. This is what happened. Remember, he says, "Oh, you remember, we were supposed to be out of here on the 18th. Thanksgiving wasn't an issue in
Mhm.
all you read in Wardor about the jury." He said, "I went back and read everything. We never talked about this." Of course you didn't. You were supposed to be out by Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Like, really sneaky, Philip. Like, not cool. Not cool. She wasn't having it when he tried to do that. It was,
None
I
of that
do,
worked. Yeah.
yeah, I do give her great credit. I also give her great credit that she did after the second time. She needed to do a mistrial. That's fair. That's
Mhm.
fair. I get it. That's fair to Danny Masterson. That's fair to the rule of law. That's how the legal system works. I get it. I do. But she also said, "Well, we're going to have a status conference on January and we're retrying this March, this date." Boom, boom, boom. Like, no, we ain't playing.
I
We
was
ain't
at
playing.
least happy
Yeah.
about that they were
hmm
willing to, because I just read off they was leaning more towards not guilty, so that seems like they have an uphill battle, but she was just right on it. And here's the date. We're gonna go for it again. Claire, can I ask you something on a personal
Sure.
level? If you
Yes.
just left all your legal expertise hat aside, would you think he's guilty or not?
Well, I don't have legal expertise for one. I'm not a lawyer, paralegal, just somebody that likes it, so to speak.
Mhm.
I might, when you mean legal expertise, you mean like
Well, I
someone
mean, just
knows
take
stuff.
I meant
Yeah.
metaphorically, but take that hat off and let go with your feelings. In other
Hmm.
words,
If
leave
I go with
logic at the
my
door and
feelings,
just go with,
oh, I
do
can
you feel
answer
he's
that.
guilty or not? Yeah.
If I can answer that, and I'll tell you
Mhm.
which statement did it for me. I
Mhm.
was trying to be as unbiased as possible. I do have issues about consent. I do want those lines drawn clearly for the
Mhm.
comfort of men, women, and anybody in a sexual relationship. I want that more clear legally. So, what did it for me? I became completely biased in this trial, and I admit it. I wanted a guilty. I did. And it was one person's statement. And it was in the testimony of one of the Jane Does when she said, I told him it was okay to do it this way, and we were doing it. Then he flipped me over, jackhammered me from behind while I'm screaming no so hard that I puked in my mouth.
Yeah. Yeah.
That did
Yeah.
it for me.
Yeah.
That did it. Bells were gone. I don't know if that was a calculated statement, but that was solid. And that happens to be the
Mhm.
only statement she repeated from the day it happened. The one she told her mother that she didn't want to tell anything. So
Mhm.
I know that statement was true. I know that woman did vomit in her mouth. I
Yeah.
know that she did say no. And I know she was just horrified at the strength, will, and determination and entitlement of a person doing that
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah.
Um, and I speak on that. That did it for me. I'm no longer going to say, I will do my best to present everybody enough information to make their own decisions. I'm not saying you have to agree with me, but when I heard that, that resonated with me. And that was the issue for me. That was the line there, that there was no doubt if that is what is happening, that he would have thought that he had permission.
Yeah, and that's where you this is what's so frustrating about the legal system sometimes is that there's the casting of doubt that we talked about. There's so many ins and outs. There's the length of time that it took. There's all you have to do is plant a seed of doubt. But if you just focus on the main thing like that, what that's only one of the transcripts too. I mean, there was one Jane Doe that was so terrified, she had a freaking nervous breakdown on the stand talking about Scientology and their alleged retaliation when she started to speak out that they've allegedly been experiencing. It's not even allegedly. These girls have been harassed. You know, this is what Scientology does to get them to shut the fuck up. But that's what I'm saying. If you just put, we can't do that because we have a legal system, obviously, and it needs to be followed. But my emotions sometimes get in the way too. When I was reading that transcript from Tony every day
Hmm.
and listening to what they were saying, it was very obvious to me that they had said no and he went ahead. Yeah, jackhammered.
Hmm.
I mean, this seems like a
Right.
very violent rapist
That
to
was,
me.
she vomited in her mouth.
Yeah.
I mean, just like, just the shock
Can
of,
you,
just, men are stronger than women. All right, don't come for me, YouTube. That's a
in
fact.
general,
Just a
too,
freaking
I guess we have
fact.
to say
In
maybe
general,
there would be an
they,
exception.
I am only a 5-foot woman. It is very easy to flip me over or
Yes, point
whatever, or
taken.
bounce me
Yes.
around a room, or like
Mhm,
put me anywhere you want.
mhm.
Okay, it happens. The men, I do like tall men too, so it could happen even more often because they are stronger, they are taller. It's going to happen. But to
Yeah,
do that against somebody's will, like to have to do that, no conversation, nothing, whatever, and just do that, and then while she's yelling no,
yeah.
to keep going. That I
That's the
understand.
definition of
Mhm.
rape. You say
It
no,
is,
and you enforce
and
your
it's the
sexual will, and
legal
that's it. Yeah.
it's the legal definition,
So how do you think
penetration
the jurors
without
got ar
consent.
how do you think when they were sitting in that room and they heard the same thing that we saw the transcripts from, how do you think they get around and justify what they did hear despite all the
That's the
doubt that may have
problem,
been
because
right?
the legal guidelines
Yeah.
because the legal ter alright, here, let me explain it this way.
Mhm.
This has been asked of me a few times, and I haven't said it publicly on YouTube yet, and I'm gonna go there. Because the legal definition is penetration without consent. When that particular witness, that particular Jane Doe, put out forward that she had allowed kissing and vaginal penetration of another type with consent, okay, because the legal definition just doesn't go on to say that it's only momentary and it doesn't put a time frame on it, it blurred the lines. It blurred the lines because she did have sex with him right before.
Mhm.
And now she's contesting to the type of sex. And
Mhm.
this is where I have an issue. Okay. I want sex on my terms willingly. And I want to share that with you in this, that, and the other thing. But if there are things I don't want to do, I don't want to do it. You're not
Mhm.
entitled to anything. Just
Exactly.
because I'll do A doesn't mean B, C, and D are on the table. Okay. If you
Exactly.
want B, C, D, and E, could you talk to me, dude? Could you talk to me about it first? Because you might get a yes. But if you
Mhm.
get a no, no is no. Okay. No is no. Sex is a broad subject, and legally, though, it is very tough. My point being,
Mhm.
legally, the jury has to look at it legally. And they had a gray area there. They did not have a black and white to go with.
Do you think it was a gray area that she was vomiting in her mouth? She said no, and he
No,
kept going anyways?
but it's an emotional area. It is not
Mhm.
a legal law area. She just didn't like it anymore. She didn't want it because that's
I
Philip
see.
Cohen's point. He said, "Well, you just didn't like it anymore."
Wow, and you and I would probably say that that's, of course, not the case. She
That
was
is the most
clearly the
inhuman, demoralizing,
right.
degrading, secondary citizen bullshit I've ever
Mhm.
heard. But legally, legally, can you see what I'm saying? If
I
that's the
can. That's why
definition,
system sucks.
it sucks. That's
It
why I am
sucks.
that's why it's uncomfortable. And let me tell you how uncomfortable I was covering this trial. Those that know me know I had
Mhm.
a really hard
I
time.
bet, and you're a
But
woman too, so I'm sure,
it
some
did.
emotions come out.
Some emotions do. Some of the situations you've been in, all of that hits you. Okay. But legally, I wanted to see, I know change has to be made, and change has to be made by this coming out. That if that legal definition isn't strong enough, okay, if that legal definition doesn't get changed and doesn't get put forward, if prosecutors don't hammer in on the true meaning of that legal definition, and this prosecution did try, but I think they didn't go far enough. They did bring it up several times, okay? They did try to take the gray area away from the jury that way, but they just weren't as successful. And I think when we see the new trial, you will see a different prosecution that way. They're
I
going to
think
be
so too.
hammering in on that definition.
I hope so, because
Okay.
that would I agree with you on what you just said. That needs to be hammered in.
Hmm.
Like an
And it
open
makes
right in
you.
the opening
Mhm,
statement.
mhm. And then what I don't, I also want to see them hammer in on, like, what does it mean when you aren't worried about whether somebody's comfortable with what you're doing? What does that say? Like, why weren't they pushing back on the type of person Danny Masterson was? And yes, he did. He said, "What kind of person would actually, when you hear somebody screaming no, what kind of person keeps going? It's not the person sitting in that chair in a three-piece suit smiling all day. Like, that's not the Danny, but the one in that bedroom that kept
Yeah.
going. That's the one we have to think about. But the jury's not looking at that person. They're looking at the one who's married now with children. This was 20 years ago.
Mhm.
Okay. And they are in the spot, to the jury's defense, that they are going to ruin this person's life. They got to be careful. Okay. He's now moved on, and they're looking like, are they giving him too much grace? I think they
Mhm.
are. They're like, look at him. He's like married now with children. She wouldn't
Yeah.
marry a monster. Would she marry a monster?
Now we get into Bijou Phillips' whole background. I don't know if you know what that is, but man, does she have a very interesting past. Let's just
Yes,
say
yes.
she grew up in an abusive family. John Phillips from the Mamas and Papas is
He
Bijou's
was, yeah.
father.
Well,
Yeah.
all of them have issues. I know
Yeah.
Mackenzie had issues all along.
And I feel
He's
bad
on
for
the
I
China's
feel
not a
yeah.
Scientologist, but she's got some stuff out there too. And
Yeah.
she put a story out after she heard one of the Jane Doe stories. When she heard
Really?
Jane Doe 4 come forward,
Mhm.
uh on her blog, she actually did her own I have regret on not saying enough when a situation went bad. Like, not saying it was what it was. Like, she
Mhm.
tried to cover it up, just like this person didn't want to acknowledge to
Mhm.
herself that she had been
Yeah.
assaulted, because that would mean she was assaulted by
Yeah.
someone she knew. Do you
Yeah.
know the statistics about the amount that this happens that doesn't get reported because it's somebody you know?
I'm
And
sure
yet
it's very high.
it's very high, because you have the shame of, you put
Yes. Yes.
society puts the shame on you
Yep.
automatically, that you put yourself
Yep.
in that situation.
You
You
must be a
put
whore, you must have wanted it. The amount of
Right, yeah, it's
judgment
like,
I was just watching this documentary called House of Hammer, last
mhm,
night where, Army Hammer, who's a kind of a C-level actor,
mhm.
basically just raped a bunch of women in Hollywood, and they came out and told their story, and the amount of hate, and you wanted it, and I mean, it's
Mhm.
just so brutal to actually even come forward. And then you have to take on your own shame. It takes a really strong person, and they have to process their own trauma. And then they have to be willing to take the heat of society. So it's easier in many cases just to shut the fuck up and
Yes.
not say
And
anything about it. That's why I love
and
these women for coming forward, by the way. They
me
had a
too.
lot of balls, and they worked really hard. Can
Mhm.
you just imagine even just everything they've been through, and they've been through hell, and then sitting there in the courtroom where their freaking abuser is sitting right there, probably with the narcissist smirk on his face, or at the very least, deadpan. I just think those gals have just enormous courage.
They did, and because that is another thing you're gonna see different in the prosecution is,
Mhm.
compounding on how did they meet? How did they come forward? How it can't be collaborative, their
Right.
stories, okay? Because
Right.
he did do a good job. I will give DA Mueller a little bit credit here. He did focus on the fact you're pointing out these inconsistencies, but let me point out what's consistent about all of this, okay?
Exactly.
And why they couldn't have collabed. One had a
Exactly. And they
gun,
didn't collab, by
one
the way.
was in
Just
yeah,
yeah.
they didn't. They met,
Yeah.
through being dissatisfied with how they were treated
Mhm.
by the LAPD, which was
Mhm.
also Judge Almeida had to make that decision not to put the LAPD on
I
trial at the
was
same
gonna
time
say,
with
they
all of that.
look at
She was
all
very
yeah.
strong about that because there was a lot
Yeah.
of inconsistencies, and those
Yeah.
witnesses were really strong. I was very proud of the one when Philip Cohen addressed her about something about the slap, whether it's a slap or a hit. And he keeps saying, "But you called it a slap or is it a hit? First you said hit, then you said slap." And then he
Mhm.
shows her the report and she said, "Clearly I didn't say slap. That's the detective saying slap. That was the detective." And she told the jury,
She
like,
called out
"Look
the
at it."
detective constantly, and like you said,
She did.
the LAPD should have put on trial for the
Exactly.
amount
So
of,
so he was trying to say it was a discrepancy in
Mhm.
her story because it's in the report different, but she's not the one who put it in the report different.
Exactly.
The detective did. The detective clearly said, "Would you call it a slap?" And she's like, "I don't know. It wasn't really open-handed." She clearly said, "No, I it was open-handed." Like she kept going back at her, and then she still put it in the report as a slap. So because that was her understanding of what she was saying. So like
Mhm.
I give them, they had to push back on little stupid stuff like that. They only used the word hour once in her testimony. And he said that meant collaboration because she referred to it as our story instead of my story.
Little, things like that were enough apparently to plant
Okay.
seeds of doubt.
And
Yeah.
that makes me want to be a prosecutor who wants to, like, rip defense people
I
to shreds,
feel
like,
you.
go,
I feel you.
"Okay, I called so this defendant was on the stand for 4.5 hours. She did 387 words. One of them was hour, and that means she's a collaborator? Could you explain that to me, please?" Like,
That's
I would
how I'd
go
handle it too. You'd make a great, great lawyer and defense attorney. Seriously, because I
Yeah,
mean that's the little
mm,
inanities that were brought up that
it
apparently
was.
did
It
cast the doubt.
Yeah, they did chip it away,
Yeah.
and there is that, but the biggest factor, getting back to what you asked me,
Mhm.
the biggest factor is that the time constraint. It is
Yeah.
whenever 20 years has passed on an
Yeah.
event, they're gonna go, "Well, why are you so upset it now and not then?" And
Yeah.
that's how Scientology came in, and I don't
Yeah.
think they were allowed to stress that enough, the harassment of Scientology keeping them away. Judge Almeida did her best. There were 5 points they were allowed to talk about: how they
Mhm.
felt about the pressure of Scientology put on them, what they did with Scientology to try to get it reported, okay, that they were a Scientologist and how they became a Scientologist, okay, and
Mhm.
just about the obstruction, like how they felt, why they were following the process and that
Yeah.
they were in there at the time. But the other truth is that they did come out at a certain period of time and they still weren't able to report because of the harassment and everything else that came out. And they weren't really able to go into great detail about that. That's more about the civil suit.
But
And
that's
it's
really important too. You make a good point because I was watching that as a Scientologist, knowing exactly how they feel. It takes us forever to gaslight ourselves, to unbrainwash, to even realize that we were abused. And also, we report to Scientology as if we're reporting to the police. That is our authority. So the mindset needs to be gotten across, I think, more powerfully as
mhm,
to, and it would answer why they took so long because there's a lot to heal from. And also, they have to deprogrammed to a certain degree from Scientology and hopefully live to tell about it so that they can understand that abuse actually happened. It took me forever, and I was not sexually abused, to understand that I was psychologically abused in Scientology. That took me years to come to terms with. So that's why it took forever. And then you add on to that the fair gaming, the alleged fair
Mhm.
gaming, and
Right.
everything that they have to survive and the balls that it takes to actually come forward. To me, it makes complete sense. I don't think there was
Mhm.
collusion, and I think that they really were raped, and they're just simply trying to, get their story out as fast as they can. And one of the gals
Mhm.
even did go and report it to the police right away, and it was basically covered up, shut down, not enough
It
evidence, and
was.
they
And
had the
and 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 that's a good point there because on that one, there's an NDA. Why would Danny Masterson pay
right,
somebody
exactly.
$400,000 if it didn't
Great
happen?
point.
Listen,
Exactly.
it's not like, let's be real
Exactly.
here.
Yeah.
At that point in time, we all know what Danny Masterson was doing. He was a
Mhm,
party boy. He was out there. It's not like
mhm.
he was worried about his damn reputation when he was out there DJing under the name Donkey Punch.
And I had to go
Like, come on.
suffer through a lot of his
Yeah.
DJ parties. They were
Oh,
fucking
me.
lame, and also some
Oh my
crazy
God, I
shit,
feel
all these
for you.
fights and
I
shit
feel
happening. It was
so.
just a
So
weird
do you?
environment.
So do you agree that it's not like he paid that $400,000 because he was worried about his pristine reputation being
He
smeared
paid
on?
her because he raped her, and he wanted to buy her silence is why he paid her
Exactly,
that.
because
And
he
it
didn't want to
doesn't
go to
take a
jail.
genius to figure that out. Yet again, we're back to the restraints of the legal system, which seems so antiquated when you can't convict a person which you know is guilty and all the evidence points to it. But again, Claire, I know nothing about the legal system, so I can barely even talk about this. But just as an outsider, it is frustrating to see the evidence as a educated person in this area, and then having to try to come to terms with all the legalese that prevented him from them coming back with a guilty verdict, because it all seems so insane when you look at the actual evidence just with the NDA alone, which you point out.
Yep,
Why would he do
exactly,
that if he was
exactly.
not in the wrong?
But because they weren't allowed to talk about Scientology in that way, we couldn't even
Hmm.
bring the witness that actually did the NDA for them and what it was about, or the conversations that Danny or Scientology had with him
Yeah,
in regards to it because of the strict guidelines. And I understand where Judge Almeida was
I do
coming from
too.
with that
Hmm.
because she was trying not to be prejudicial, and you do had to give some lenience to the defense in that. Although it's not our fault that Danny's a Scientologist, he is. That's on
Hmm.
him. I mean, I can't. It's like me walking into a room and saying, you can look at me, but don't see my red hair. Do
Right.
not look at my red hair. Okay? Don't do it.
And of
Okay?
course,
Just
it's the
don't
first
do it.
thing you look at. Yeah.
Exactly. It's just like it's part of you. It's what you are. You're going to get some judgment about it either way. Okay? And if they're going to say that just the word Scientology brought negative contention to Danny and prejudice, well,
Mhm.
whose fault is that? That's not the judge or the jury or even the accusers. That would be Scientology's fault.
That's
That's
correct.
their rep. Oh,
You
that's what
know,
they
I
did.
They
you
they
know?
one of these days, remember how we were talking about in the last conversation, how it's a trickle down effect and it all starts
Yep.
with Hubbard and they
Mhm.
got into my
Mhm.
family and fucked up everybody else's family. And also
Mhm.
Danny might not be a sociopath minus Scientology because they do make secondary sociopaths.
Well, I have called
Perhaps
him a
none of the
victim of
Mhm.
Scientology. That
It's
that
very,
this
it's my jury's out on that, no pun intended, because I think Danny might be a psychopath irregardless of Scientology, but that's strictly a guess. But if he's not, they make secondary sociopaths. I can tell you that from personal experience because I'm not one, but damn that they shut down my heart, my emotions, and
Mhm.
they make you into
They
a
make those
ruthless person.
weaknesses. You don't wanna stay with your family if your
Exactly.
family does wrong. That's weakness, that's emotion, that's not
Right.
critical thinking,
There
that's
is
not
no
the right
emotion
way.
allowed. And in
Like,
fact, they even
that
call it
yeah,
human emotion and reaction in Scientology,
yeah.
Claire. You
Oh,
can't
what is
have
that?
any of
The
that.
aliens speaking to you? Emotions are aliens, you know that.
It's
Come on.
such a twisting up too,
It
because my
is.
emotions are the one thing that I needed to suss my situation, and also the one thing that opened up big time when I left that environment.
That had to be so hard because you're finding them.
It was
They've gotta
bizarre.
overwhelm you. You don't know what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
I mean, I really commend you. You
Oh,
seem
thanks, Claire.
much even though I know it's still a work in process and you have to work
Mhm,
on it every day, just the fact that you're
mhm,
helping other people with it and you're free to speak about it, the negative and the positive at any time, and be willing to say, just as you said to me a million times, no, nobody's perfect. Like I made mistakes, everybody make mistakes, but just to be out there and put it out there and just try to leave a little bit of good for other people to find so they can find their way too is definitely commendable. Because I have said that I think that Danny may be a victim of Scientology. And
mhm,
when I say that, I
mhm.
mean that Scientology created the culture to where Danny was able to
Exactly.
act the way he act with no
Exactly.
recourse. They're
Yep.
the ones that made it, that he had no
Exactly.
accountability. They're the
Right.
ones that put it on the women that, hey, you did this to you because you're in a relationship, so rape doesn't
Absolutely.
exist.
That's why
Because you
Scientology needs to be put on fucking trial one of these days, because think about all the abuse that's going to happen in the future.
Mhm,
Perhaps Danny's a victim as well. This never would have happened in the first place, and this will continue on because, like you said,
mhm,
it's the environment. The whole environment is toxic and it's designed
mhm,
to create these kind of situations that then have to be covered up. It can't be any other way with the policies of Hubbard.
mhm,
So we're all victims to a certain degree. And
mhm,
it's just like, when the fuck is Scientology going to be put on trial? Not only to prevent future abuses, which are guaranteed to happen, but they always, we almost got into this in the last conversation. Somehow they're above the law. Now, a big part of that, of course, is because they have their tax exempt status, which needs to be removed and will help to eliminate them or lessen their power of abuse. But nonetheless, like, they are above the law. And sooner or later, that has to be challenged, because we can't just, we're going to keep breeding future rapists. And it can't be
mhm.
any other way.
It can't because there has to be some accountability. I do
Hmm.
believe, in some way, I don't believe in Scientology as a whole, but
Hmm.
I think it's misguided with what they're doing with the auditing, trying to say you must have done something to do something to cause
Hmm.
this or that. What they're trying to do is make you own, and that the fact that things don't just happen in a
Right.
vacuum, that you're part
Great
of it.
point.
I get that part. I get that.
Mhm.
I'm
But you
all
see
about
how it's
accountability.
manipulated. But
It's
right, but they use
manipulated to be
that.
the
It's like they
other.
use a
Mhm.
good thing to turn it on its head, invert it, and turn it around on you. But you're right. That's a great point, Claire, because so we're back to, how do idiots like us fall for Scientology? They appeal to our responsibility to be a better person, and they sell it
Exactly.
like we're really doing that. But it's
Because
an
you are
inversion of
looking
that.
inwards and
Yeah.
you are trying to project outwards. And that's why I say
Yeah.
some of the smartest, biggest hearted, really want to make change out there people are involved in this.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's what's making it so evil and
Mhm.
dangerous, and why I speak on it so much. And
Exactly.
they may not like it, and I'm not disparaging to a single person that's in Scientology or comes out of it
I
at
understand.
all. And when you use the word idiot, oh, I don't like that. You don't ever refer to yourself that way. You blinded, yes. Lack of information, yes. Idiot means you weren't able, or you didn't, that you weren't capable. You just didn't have the opportunity to see the
Yeah,
whole picture.
and not only that, well, Aaron makes a great point here. He says they're largely protected by the public perception that the followers consented to their experience. It's exactly like a rape victim. Well,
It is.
she pulled
And
it in. She must have won it. She was a whore. It's like, yeah,
and that's the
exactly,
problem.
Aaron.
That's the problem. Even the jury had the problem with, and I'll
Right.
speak loudly. I could be naked in your bed. We could have just did A. That doesn't entitle you to anything else. If you want to
Exactly.
even do A again, if I say no,
Right.
I am
Right.
I
Right.
am required to convey the consent. I get that. Okay,
Right.
by my actions or my words. And if no is no, it's not going to just be actions, it's going to be words and
Hmm.
actions, so you clearly understand. I
Right.
get my part of it. Your part of it is to hear that. Right,
Yeah,
is
it
to hear
sounds
that.
simple enough, doesn't it? It all
It
so
doesn't it. So why
yeah.
doesn't that work? I mean, I
I don't
should be
know. You
allowed,
tell
i
me.
sh- I should be allowed, as I do often, to walk naked any damn where I want and not have that entitle anybody to anything.
Exactly.
Period. Okay? It's like these things that they put on us, and it took a long time. I've been a woman all my life,
Hmm.
obviously, and
Congratulations.
congratulations. But what it took me a long time to get to the point that the shame that they put on me is not my shame. It's their fear. Period.
Exactly. And you know what? I don't mean to throw the male species under the bus, because I am one, but I'm not kidding you when I tell you I've always kind of like, I don't self-identify with the male class either, because guys can be assholes and they can be very aggressive.
Mhm,
And I've always been so, I don't know why, but it's like, as soon as a girl like doesn't like me or anything, that's it. I'm like, I'm embarrassed or whatever. The last thing in the world I would do is like impose my will on someone that wasn't,
mhm.
feeling a mutual way. But and I'm totally generalizing here, but in general, my opinion is that guys can be much more aggressive than girls, and that there's a thing where if a girl does, I don't know, it just seems, I wouldn't, it seems like it'd be tough to be a woman, because you always have to fend off
You
against overly aggressive guys, perhaps. And not only that, Claire, but if something sexually, if you do get raped, then you might be looked at as, again, the person that well,
Brought it
you
on.
caused it.
What were you there? I can
Yeah.
tell you that very often, even when you're looking for support in your
Hmm.
family and friends, the first thing is like, "Well, where were you? How did this happen?" Like,
Oh God.
what? Like, what? Except for like, but here it is. The part that really is the hardest part for me to deal with it is the
Hmm.
entitlement that they think they could do that to any other human being against their
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
Is like, that is not a strong person to deal with. And that's how I got it, because it's fear and it's like trying to put people down and purposely trying to make you feel and be less than.
Hmm.
And that happens on all different levels in our society, unfortunately. Um there's
Yeah.
been a lot of change. I have to say that I am surrounded by many men who are just as offended by the prospect of it as I am, and even more so.
Hmm.
Um,
That's good to
and
hear.
and and that is very good to hear, and I applaud them because they're willing to have the conversations. And I ask tough questions. Okay, I have asked almost everyone in my circle the question of what what makes them feel that they are entitled to that, that is okay. Where does that come from to make
Hmm.
me less than, that I am just whatever you want to do to me whenever you want to do it?
And you're
Where does
right. Yeah, you're
where does
right.
that come from? And they're like, I don't think like that. I'm like, no, no, no. I'm saying, as a man, can you tell me, is there anything in there that promotes that? Like, tell me. I don't understand, because I'm a woman. I would not think to do that to anyone. And I do think that
Hmm.
women need to speak out on it too. So many of them, like the Jane Doe's, unfortunately said, I was told that in a relationship it couldn't resist. Like that I put myself there. This is what I do. This is my paying in
And
under
that's a.
Scientology,
I was gonna
that
say that's,
I
yeah.
have debt to him because he's the upstart. So if he
Hmm.
decides to violate my anus while I'm sleeping and then laugh about it when I ask him, that's my payment in. That's apparently the price he decided for me to be there.
And that's where
What?
Scientology should be put on trial, and why they should have been
Exactly.
allowed to come in more, because that's the whole, we were talking about the upstat downstat. Danny was the one that was famous. The gals that were his girlfriends, they were, up and coming actresses or whatever. And the whole Scientology culture,
Mhm,
it's all about being upstat or downstat. And
mhm.
that's the world that you live in. You're not living in the wider world, and you don't follow those rules. And that's why they would have felt obligated to give in a little bit more to Danny, and why Danny would be allowed to be aggressive up to and including rape, and
But
have it be justified within that culture because of
which is the
the way
one
it
who
works.
wanted a relationship with him, that they were just starting out. She
Yeah.
thought it was a date, that she was
Hmm.
allowing a little, what they call fingering, she was allowing the kissing,
Hmm.
she was allowing things because
Hmm.
she thought they were starting a romantic relationship.
Right.
And then she kept saying, "No, but I don't want that." And then when he did it, she's like, "No, why'd you do that? I don't want that." And that was in the shower. And even after
Yeah.
she said that, "I don't want that," and he
Yeah.
half has to carry her to the other room because she
I know.
can't control her own body.
Yes.
Puts her in the bed, she falls asleep and wakes up to more going on. And he's like, "But I told you I don't want to do that." Like, what do you not
Not only
get? You
that, I
know?
mean, one of them was unconscious.
Woke
When
up
he,
and
are you,
then and
like,
and
what
then
else would that
what?
be except for rape? How could you possibly call it anything else? I not only didn't give you my consent, I wasn't conscious to be able to give you my consent or not.
I am
I'm,
absolutely actually surprised that they didn't come out with the defense, and I think it's because of
yeah.
Scientology, because they'll never
Yeah.
admit that there's a label for it, but there
Right.
are people that actually get more satisfaction when you are either fake asleep or unconscious, and it's somophilia, and it's a whole big thing, and
Oh my God.
it's their thing. Yeah.
I
No,
didn't even
see,
know about
yeah,
that. You
yeah,
learn something every day.
Google's my friend and my enemy at the same time,
I
but I was
understand.
trying to find out, why would such a powerful person, he's successful, he's got good family, he doesn't
Mhm.
seem upset that he's a Scientologist, he feels
Mhm.
like he belongs, he's got a good career going on here. Why does he need to degrade people this way? What kind of a need is there? Yeah, I'm like that. I'm always trying to say, is the monster really that big, or do I just not understand the monster? Yeah, sorry. I did. I tried to understand it. I failed
Right.
because of his attitude about it. I
Yeah.
did. because even the ones who were awake afterwards or woke up during, if it's a thing that he needed because of somophilia, he still could understand consent. He obviously did understand consent based on one of the stories where she said no and he stopped and left.
Right, right. And that's happened many times in one of the Jane Doe's relationship, if I'm recalling too, where they would constantly
Yes.
get in fights over sex, where she would say no
Over sex.
a lot.
A
Yeah.
lot, okay? And especially in the terms of, yes, I'll have that. We'll be clear. We use the real language. Yes, I'll have vaginal sex with you, but no, I don't want to have anal sex.
Right.
Sorry. Sorry, I don't.
And then again,
Okay.
Claire, we're back to Scientology though, because according to that toxic thinking, in order for her to stay in exchange with her second dynamic, that's what they call the family and boyfriend, girlfriend, and sex in Scientology. In order to stay in exchange on that part of your life or dynamic, she needs to give him sex whenever he wants. And he is there to pay for her way and give her a place to live and a roof over her head, and perhaps he will help her with her acting career. Everything's about exchange in Scientology and
Hmm.
about those different dynamics. So that's why you were mentioning earlier, and hopefully when they come back with a defense this time, or they prosecute it again, that this is what sucks why Scientology can't be on trial, because these policies and that way of thinking needs to be gotten across to appreciate the world that they were living in and how she was out exchanged by not letting him rape her.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? That's
Exactly.
yeah.
Hmm. And then to be told like it doesn't exist, like it's not like, okay, you deal with the feelings of it because like that didn't
Yeah.
happen.
And
Like
then
that
not
didn't
only
happen.
that, it was her fault then. She brought one of the Jane Does, the
Hmm.
first one, was told by the ethics officer, Julian Swartz, that we don't mention the word rape. And not only that,
Yeah.
you're in a 2D, that's another Scientology term. You're in a
Right.
relationship with this guy, so it can never be rape. It's you're out exchange. So not only did she not get to be heard and, action taken on Danny, since Danny's the upstat, she had to do all sorts of ethics conditions and auditing
Yeah,
and
she
go
did.
into her past lies about what
Hmm.
she did to pull it into
Hmm.
her yeah. That's another thing about Scientology that we were talking about last time, where kids are not kids. We're spiritual beings with incredible powers and memories. We just don't So we already know all this stuff. So anything, it reminds me of the law of attraction and The Secret. Anything that happens to you, it's all thought. It's all your own doing. And again, it seems like a good thing because you're taking responsibility for your entire life and your entire thought patterns. But you know what? Everything isn't thought, and everything isn't your fault. That you really can be
Exactly.
violated. You really
Hmm.
can have pull things in that are not your
Yeah.
fault and have nothing to do with your quote unquote past lives. You can simply be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But if you believe in this new age thinking where everything's your fault and it's all thought creates reality and that's the be all end all, then
Hmm.
you can be locked in this vicious cycle in Scientology
Right.
where you can't see abuse and you take on everything to be your responsibility and your fault. That's another evil
Hmm.
inversion of
It is
responsibility
because
in
you're never
Scientology.
done, right? You're
It
never,
never
ever,
ends.
ever done.
There's no way
Because,
out of that trap
you know,
either. You're
in
right, you're never
speaking
done.
about Jane Doe 3, who was the one that was in the 6-year relationship with him, when Philip Cohen tried to turn it on her, "Well, you kept going back and you stayed and this and that." And she goes,
Right.
"Yes. And
Yeah.
I tried to get him to go to Scientology
Right.
willingly and report this. And I tried to report it so he could get help with it. Like so he could be
Exactly.
grow with
Exactly.
it and everything, and was turned away. And then they were like, and she really and she just plain out said, when you love someone, you want
Yeah.
to help them. I clearly told him I thought it was wrong. We fought all the time about
Right.
it, but I was trying to get him help.
And anybody in an abusive relationship knows how that dynamic works. And that's why I love that psychologist that they brought on, who I thought
Hmm.
explained that very well. You can definitely be
She
in a
did.
relationship, have all sorts of fights and arguments, but you're simply trying. If you're with a narcissist, you're not, you're gonna try to make them better, try to make them better. Oh, he can change. Oh, he was so loving. I know he can be mean, but then I got the golden period again. And it's just like you go back and forth, you're walking on eggshells. And they were just simply describing an abusive relationship. And then what is Scientology but an abusive relationship on top of that that allows that toxicity and narcissism to thrive? And these poor gals are just simply trying to fix their boyfriend. That's the way I saw it. Oh, he'll
Yep.
change. He'll get better, you
No.
know?
And she was, and she really, because
Yeah.
remember, she
She believed
wasn't a
that for a while.
Scientologist. She became one for him to stay in the
Mhm.
relationship.
Right.
And so, and she really believed. She clearly stated on that standard at the time that this was
Yeah.
all happened. She totally believed in Scientology in a way, and
Mhm.
she really thought it would be helpful. And yet
Mhm.
she was told, as the others were told, well, you could put it in a report, but it's the kind of report that, you know, mm, what was it called?
Shouldn't be.
Things that shouldn't be.
Mm.
So her actual assault was just things that shouldn't be,
Right.
and it should have had a little clause that we're not going to do a damn thing about in parentheses, and they put it
Right.
in a file,
You know
and
the
they said if
policies well.
Danny ever comes in for an auditing or whatever, we'll address this.
Right. That's exactly how it works. I'm surprised you know the inner workings to that degree because that's exactly
Well,
how
that
it
came
works.
out in the trial. That actually came out in the trial. I know that from listening
Wow.
to Tony and
Hmm.
Chris and yourself and Aaron, and then she alluded to it in the trial, and one of them actually said it. And I was so offended at the name of the report,
The
things it
things it
shouldn't be.
shouldn't be.
Like, damn straight
Isn't
assault
that
should
isn't that
not
just such
be.
a nice, cute little puppy dog way of saying like, you could be raped, but that's just something that shouldn't be. And like you said, we'll go ahead and handle that with Danny should he come in, and we'll make it a quick session, and he'll be in and out of here. It totally minimizes the crap out of illegality and stuff. Things that shouldn't be. In the real world, those are called crimes for which you can be imprisoned. Yeah.
Yeah,
Did I?
true.
Oh, I thought I lost
No,
you
you
there.
didn't. You didn't.
Okay.
Nope. I'm right
You were in a
here.
moment of
Well,
contemplation, deep
I am
contemplation.
because
Mhm.
I'm looking for questions for you from the
Oh,
chat. I want to
okay.
make sure that everything that they're asking about, because they are actually
Mhm.
very, especially the men, are very, very insulted at the fact that that is allowed to happen in the bubbles that it is, in that they don't
Mhm.
understand how anybody could actually do what was said was done, how doing it, like why you would want to address anybody that way while they're sleeping or not able to participate. These are good men, and there's plenty
Mhm.
of them in the world. I am happy to report
Yeah, and
that.
Aaron, I
Yeah,
didn't mean to, he said
yeah,
it's not men you're talking about, Doug, it's
it's
assholes. Yeah,
assholes. Yeah,
absolutely correct.
hmm,
Because there's
yeah,
assholes in any kind of thing.
hmm.
I was
It is.
just I was just trying I was
Yeah,
just saying, like,
hmm,
my heart does break a little for the
yeah.
women because, as you were
I
saying
refer
earlier,
to
you
them.
can't protect
Yeah.
yourself, you're smaller, and it has a tendency where the male can dominate the
Yeah.
female easier, but that's not all males, of course not.
Yes. Yep. I'll tell you, though, it doesn't. It's not a man to me. Definitely that kind of
Well
thing. When you
said.
have to do that thing, um, the people that are in my chat that are actual men, they're the
Mhm.
ones speaking out, and I speak out for them too, because laws have to change for men also, for all
That's a
of us.
great point.
This,
Thanks for
um,
saying that.
I when I did the Johnny Depp Amber Heard
Mhm.
trial, and
Mhm.
I was appalled that no one could believe that he was a victim. And
I
I
know.
happen to know that here in the United States that more can be done to a man during a divorce. Like the minute you
Mhm.
say I don't want the woman, even if you have children or whatever, you are villainized.
Yep.
It doesn't matter what they did to you. She could have cheated with your brother,
Yep.
your father, and all of your friends. And if you walk out the door, you are villainized. You have no parental rights. You have to pay money. It don't matter what she did or why you want to leave. The fact that you left, it's all on you, dude. And I'm not saying that.
Exactly.
That's the legal system saying that. And that's what I've been promoting and fighting against. Like when I say men too, I mean, yeah, they're getting shit too. The
That's
legal
what was
system.
so great about that trial because, I when I ran into that narcissist that I told you that I interview on my channel, I was dating a Russian gal that completely love bombed me, wanted me to move into her house within 2 weeks, and I was, getting my life thrashed around very similar to Scientology, and I was like, but no one would believe me. I mean, I clearly must be I'm the male, but there are female narcissists out there that can absolutely wreck a man, like Amber Heard. So it was really interesting to show that yeah, men can be abused and psychologically manipulated by very evil, spider-like, sociopathic women as well. It's not just men. So yeah, I think that trial brought a lot out, possibly to expose that it's on both sexes.
It is. And Brilliant brings up the point that it's ingrained into a lot of religion. It's ingrained into a lot
Right.
of, so that the laws
True.
don't change. But I remember being back when Me Too started, and this came up in the Amber Heard trial because they were very much behind her, the whole thing. They still are, because they think that just because you say it's so, it's
Yeah.
so. And I don't necessarily believe that. I want to hear the evidence and I want to see it. I believe these women, okay, and they're not even showing me evidence, but I believe them because of how they're saying what they're saying,
Mhm.
okay, and that I have no reason not to believe them. But Amber
Mhm.
Heard was on that stand and kept I watched all the trials. I watched the whole thing for
Mhm.
6 years, and she just kept expanding on everything, making it worse. She was taking stories from other people and making it hers. She's a sick individual, in my humble
Very,
opinion.
very sick. And
Okay,
well,
and
she's what I would call a narcissist. Not to I know that word's lost its meaning because it's sort of
it has,
overpopularized.
because
It
I need to
sucks
correct
too
you.
because it okay, sure, please.
Narcissistic tendencies greatly, but did you know that those that we think are narcissistic, it's very hard to prove narcissism. Less than 5% of the people that you think are would have it.
How
And
about
I got that from a psychologist. She definitely has borderline personality disorder,
oh,
and she has
right, or
histrionic personality
whatever you
disorder,
wanna call it. Here's
and
I know.
narcissistic tendencies. She does think everything revolves around her. That's how I know you're meaning it.
I
She
get
does think there
totally.
are no
Because
consequences.
the
Yeah,
terms get so and I'm no
it
psychologist.
is.
So
Yeah,
what I like to say just to cut through, is it a sociopath, psychopath, narcissist, borderline, whatever. It's somebody who doesn't has a conscience and is manipulative. That's what I'm talking about. They don't, in other words, self-preservation, lying, manipulating, gaslighting, those kind of people is what I mean when I say a narcissist. Most people don't go around living like that. I mean, watching that whole trial with Amber, she came across unbelievably phony and like she
she
was
did,
lying.
and she
I didn't
was.
get that with Johnny
Yeah.
Depp, you know?
No, and they
And
both
and
got to tell their stories. They both took
mhm,
the stand. The jury didn't believe her. When it came to anything about abuse, they went with him. They did give her that judgment based on a false statement that Waldman made about the apartment, about the state of the apartment and a hoax, but not about anything to do with abuse. So she didn't win anything in regards to abuse anywhere. They didn't believe her about
mhm.
any of that.
Thank God
All
because
you
she
know,
was such a
and
transparent liar.
defamation is so hard to prove. They
Right,
needed to do all of those
right.
questions yeses to get there, and they
You're
had to
right.
prove intent and malice, and they did.
Mhm. That is hard to
20
prove.
21 questions, all of them yes. Okay, I was floored.
Wow.
I didn't think they could get there. I
Right,
really didn't. I
right.
thought maybe on one or two of them, but
Mhm,
all of them.
mhm.
21 questions, all of them yes. That mean all of the counts they did.
That's
And I think
amazing.
they were fair, but what happened was they're trying to say because Me Too exists, Johnny Depp has to be the villain. And I'm like, "No, that's not what Me Too is about."
I
I
know, but that's what it
applauded
morphed into. Yeah.
I applauded Me Too because voices could be heard. But you know what? All voices, not just female ones, all
Right.
voices, okay? All victims. I'm not taking
Yep.
sides here. Did I applaud that legislation got changed and rape kits got saved and you got more time for statute of limitations, that
Mhm,
therapy was used, that how we handle a victim immediately has changed, how the interview process has become much more caring and understanding and all of this, how time has been allowed, how you can I even applaud the fact that you can get a temporary restraining order and then you have to go back and prove it because you want to get people out of violent situations immediately. You have to think
mhm.
of the what could happen. Then
Right,
I do believe in separating them like that. But to ruin a man's life, what shouldn't happen is that it's
right.
public. That because this is how women are using it against men, because it's allowed to be public when this happens. It's allowed to go out there everywhere immediately before they even make it permanent. Now, I agree, once it's permanent, that's fair game. Okay. But
Mhm,
there's a like in a couple of weeks, they get to go present evidence and say, I didn't really do this. Like she might be crazy. It might not have happened. It might have been a misunderstanding. He might have just been late picking up his kids, which I just read a statistic that actually 11% of them were for that. Okay. Yeah. Is that crazy or what? And so tell me that they're not being persecuted. Yes, women are using it because they're acting out of emotion and hurt,
mhm.
okay, and because they walked away and they want full custody, and unfortunately because their lawyers are saying this is how the system works. If you want to keep that house, if you don't want it to go for him, you need to file a restraining, you need to say there was a problem, you need to do this. This is what lawyers are actually telling them to do, okay, to use the system to their advantage. And that's
Right.
why it should not be public until it's permanent. There really needs to be something there if you're going to put that on somebody.
Mhm.
And then the lawyers wouldn't be able to use it so easily, would they? As a threatening, as a negotiating chip, which is what happened in Amber Heard's thing. She literally put out a letter that was put in the trial that said, if you don't do this, I'm going to file I'm going to file for a restraining order, and you say you abused me. I
I
want
know.
all the penthouses. You're going to pay my way. And I know I'm getting off track here, but it does
No,
relate
you're
here
not.
because we are talking about the men's issues. And I just want them to know I'm not biased. In this trial, I supported the women. In the last trial, I supported the man.
Yeah, and
100%.
not only, you just reminded me of is Paul Haggis' trial, who there was another
Exactly.
ex-Scientologist,
Right
and you
down
know
the
what?
hall. Yep. Hmm.
Yeah, now I would have reason to, Paul kinda, like, helped me out a little bit when I was first starting to do the YouTube channel, was willing to talk to me or whatever,
Hmm.
and I found him to be a nice guy, but I gotta tell you, my gut instinct when, I'm not just saying this because he was convicted, and there might be people that think, it's Scientology. I don't think they were behind anything. I think he actually was guilty of those crimes. It's just a personal opinion. So it's not about, and then in the Masterson, I believe the gals. So it doesn't matter, if it's male or female. It just matters who's the abuser and who's being abused. Like, what are the facts, in other words, of the situation?
Hmm. Yeah. True. We don't know, and that's why we have trials, and that's why they need to
Yeah.
be, and that there's a process, and
And that
that's
they're
why.
innocent until proven guilty too, which
And
is
if you
frustrating as it is maybe in the outcome. It's really
and if we
important not to
really
throw
believe
people's
that,
lives away, you know?
true, and if we really believe that, and that's what the
Mhm.
legal system is about, then why are these things allowed to be public and ruin
Yeah.
somebody's life before they're settled?
Well, now we have as the court of public opinion is like almost overshadowing
And
everything.
and isn't that crazy coming from a YouTuber who literally is reporting on trials like every
Yeah.
Monday at 4 o'clock? But
Yeah.
I really believe it that
Yeah.
people's lives are getting judged in the public. And that's why
Yeah.
I try, regardless of where it's going or how I personally believe, I try to just give you all the information to decide for yourselves. And yeah, I
Mhm.
have a good time talking about it. But would I cry if they shut that down, especially on assault and battery and murder and very vile life altering crimes?
Right.
That until it's settled, we should not know.
I know, but that's just not the world we live in anymore. Someone in the comments was mentioning earlier the parasocial relationship that people have towards their favorite celebrities, and it's like there's so much
Mhm,
emotion in the court of public opinion, especially with the internet, where information's so easy to share. It's almost that's probably a good thing why this trial wasn't, the
mhm,
Masterson trial wasn't televised. Keep it out of public opinion as much as possible, but it's not possible to do that anymore, and it's
mhm.
almost like people are tried and convicted on the internet before they actually, have a fair trial.
It's true.
It's
And
crazy, right?
I'm glad that they didn't have them in there. I know it was harder
Yeah.
for Tony, but one thing,
Mhm.
Masterson would have been judged harshly for his stance. He was very aloof and whatever. And just the
Mhm.
testimony from the women to put it all out there, it would have been even harder for them. That's
Yeah.
raw negative, and it was for protection of them too.
Yeah, and I
Um,
absolutely
it
agree with that.
and I agree with you about what they had to do. For him to actually say that they were lying, that they put themselves through this for 20 years.
Yeah.
And then to do all of this, that it's just going to be monetary. No, there is a civil suit. I grant that. And when it comes to Scientology, and you had mentioned, I really hope Scientology does get to pay for that. There are a ton of suits coming at Scientology. People are tired. Okay. And they are going to
Mhm.
have to do a lot more legal. And let me tell you, the Supreme Court and the legal system's tired of you too, Scientology, because take note, these two trials just recently that happened, you got slapped back. You got told, stop throwing me nonsense in here. Say what you mean. I don't want all this proliferous, like, don't be burning down forests in my court. I
Right.
don't want to hear this stuff. Make it real. File a motion because they do. They throw so many money at it. I mean, I couldn't keep up with the. I think it was like three cases ago. It was a civil case. I couldn't keep up with the amount of filings. Like it was only 3 or 4 months old, and there was 1,093 posts of documents in Pacer on this trial. And I'm like, really? Like pretrial. And look at how long they kept Masterson from coming to trial in
I
pretrial
know.
motions, in
I
delays, and
know.
this
I
and that.
know.
And I can guarantee Philip Cohen did just say he will file a motion to dismiss before January for the case review. Yes, he will. Yes, he will.
Yeah.
Before January 10th, he will file it so that it comes up on case status and it
Yeah.
has to be addressed before the trial
Yep.
on March.
I'm
But
sure you're right about that.
but the fact that some of them were even leaning a certain way means that there's enough there for them to judge on. They were able to deliberate, which means there should be a trial.
That's a good point. Claire, I don't feel good about this, man. I mean, every time I get my hopes up about Scientology or this is going to expose them or this, that, you know what? I've been living this for so long that I've watched them get away with everything. Because again, we're back to the point of they're above the law. They're never held to
Mhm,
account. It's just the Mastersons and the people in it that get put on trial. But they should. But I'm saying Scientology never gets a trial.
mhm,
So it's just so frustrating because they have so much Like, they had a Lisa McPherson, they murdered her,
Mhm.
and they invaded, they had the largest espionage on file ever, in infiltrating government offices with Operation Snow White. What more do you and then they have mysterious deaths, suicides, disconnecting of families, breaking up families.
Mhm.
They just have such a litany of real crimes, yet they never actually get put on trial. It's just mind-boggling to me. Like,
Yeah.
th- they're still here. I mean, this thing should have been shut down a long time ago. What do you, I don't understand it. Like, we pretend to have a legal system, but it
Mhm.
almost seems like it protects the criminals rather than, or the really powerful people with the money, and they can buy themselves out if you have enough money. And I know we have the anti-slap law to prevent, big
Mhm.
organizations from crushing the little man. But when it plays out in the real world, it almost seems like the more money and power you have, like an organization like Scientology, the more you can get away with in this world. And the less you have, the easier it is to, fuck with your life. Because in,
Mhm.
in a real world, like I'm just speaking from a utopian point of view right now, just a perfect
Right.
world kind of thing. But in
Mhm.
a real world, a world that was sane, there wouldn't be all these legal and this, that, and the other thing and motions. And I mean, it's so complex that it almost seems to lean towards a difficulty in convicting a criminal and more easy to get them off because of all the this, that, and the others that people have to go through. Scientology is clearly criminal, has a 7-decade history, which could easily be dragged into a court and shut down tomorrow. Yet because
Mhm.
they have money and power, it never happens. And it's like we deal with the lesser little problems as a result of these bigger corporations like the Masterson
Mhm.
thing, which
Mhm.
just, and he's probably going to get off. So it's so frustrating because
It is.
he's
Is that what
guilty,
you
but
think? You
I
think?
don't think there's going to be justice served. I think he's going to fucking get off. And I
Do
didn't
you
feel
think we're
that
going to
way
get a
weeks ago.
trial in? Do you think we're going to get a trial in March?
Well,
Do
I
you
mean,
think it'll be retried?
don't they have to, Claire, at this point? I mean, isn't it a go ahead
They
anyways?
scheduled it. Not if he files a motion to dismiss and he makes good enough legal point on
Do you
it.
think he would make a good enough legal point? Because the judge seemed pretty
No,
adamant about,
I've
we're
I've
fucking
read
starting
his
the trial.
briefs. No, I read his briefs. He
Hmm.
doesn't even match up the cases. Well, not that I'm an expert, but I think if you go to other legal people, they would tell you he doesn't match up the cases very well, to the point that the judge was insulted on Commodore's briefs and said, "This
Hmm.
doesn't even match what we're talking about." Like, clearly said it right to him. So no, I don't think she will, but maybe he'll get somebody else to write it.
I
Who
think
knows?
they'll go to trial again. You know what I think will happen? Because I've seen this happen with Scientology. Now their lawyers aren't actually running this, but they probably are whispering in the ear. And normally
You
they
did
go in there and
see that. Did you see, though, the
yeah,
people
they
from the
had
legal forum were in the audience,
I
or
know, and
back in
that's
the
to be
chairs? Yeah.
expected. And they weren't even really super subtle about it. But you know what normally happens, Claire? Is they
Mhm.
send in 15 of their lawyers, and when they lawyer up, they dance circles around the judge with all the legalese. That's why I said I feel like the justice system is protected to be able to manipulate it, which L. Ron Hubbard taught us, by the way, how to do. How he said,
Mhm.
always defend, never attack. So if you have enough money, you can use a legal system. I mean, this is almost a direct quote from Hubbard, that you can easily manipulate the justice system if you have the most power and money. It's not there to really, serve justice in
Mhm.
a way where it's a level playing field. So what I've watched Scientology do decade after decade is get everything dismissed, and they're almost never held accountable. And then if they are going to get nailed, they just buy the person off for however much money, and it never goes to trial, right? So because they have the money and power, they can get out of anything. So I know that they're not on trial, and that their own lawyers are not lawyering up. They have Cohen and stuff they're not Scientologists. But it almost doesn't matter, because every time Scientology is involved, I feel like you can almost be guaranteed that they're going to get their man off. And I
Mhm.
was really excited about this particular trial, because I thought for sure he's going to be found guilty, especially when I'm reading Tony's blogs every day. I'm like,
Mhm.
how on earth is anybody going to be listening to this and find it
Well
any other way? And
well,
yet
if
they
you've been
have.
following it
Yeah.
all the way back to 2007, like before they actually
Hmm.
came out in 2017, when investigations were being done, and there are 5, like you said, and then you add the 6th one, which is the 4th Jane Doe that came forward, which wasn't a charged case, but was just because Philip Cohen opened the door that they were colluding, and
Hmm.
they wanted to get another story in there of somebody that nobody knew. And it was the same story. twice. Like
Right.
they made that point, and they needed that for the jury to see. Collusion wasn't a thing. But Philip Cohen was not very happy about Jane Doe 4 being able to testify, but
Mhm.
clearly, and she was not a Scientologist either, so he didn't have the "you're just blaming Scientology,"
Right.
and oh, by the way, you're all colluding together because you're in a lawsuit. She's not
Right.
in their lawsuit. She did not know them very well. She came forward willingly. She's the one who approached them, and had a very similar story on key points. Could not feel my
Mhm.
body, was not in control of myself, my body, woke up in the middle of the something. I was asleep, not in control. I didn't want it. I said no. I got up. I left. You know,
Seems pretty
Same
cut
kind
and
of
dry
thing.
to me.
hmm
Yeah.
there was a lot of similarity there that if this happened without the 20-year gap, there would be DNA, there would be testing of the drinks, there would be like all of that. We would have a lot more to go with, and yes, he'd be in jail. But right
Mhm.
now we've got a mistrial. We got a mistrial because there was a good defense in putting doubt on the women's stories, because that's the nutshell right there.
Yeah,
The jury did not believe 100% everything they said.
I
It was
know.
able to cast doubt. Okay. And a lot of that might not even be what they said or how. It could be the 20 years. Let's be real. It could be the 20 years
Yeah,
difference. Okay.
yeah,
It could be, why are you doing it now? Like, this is all in
yeah.
their head. And they weren't, and it did get the fact about the Scientology, but we weren't really allowed to go into it very deep, although Mueller went into it as much as he could as to how they felt and why they couldn't come forward and all of that. But we really weren't, like, every time they did, they also had the defense over there saying, "Foul, I want a mistrial. You said
Mhm.
Scientology." Like, you said Scientology. Like, no. Um,
This is what I'm talking about, Claire. Like, there's so many things you have to dance around, be careful with. You can bring in this about Scientology. You can't bring in this about Scientology. One of the freaking victims, one of the Jane Does, wasn't allowed to be put on trial because she was unconscious. And apparently, if you're unconscious, they weren't allowed to bring that particular person in. I remember Tony talking about this. I don't know the specifics, but in other words, what I'm saying is, even though there was like 8 or some other Jane Does, it was hard for them just to get those specific 3 in there. So
mhm,
clearly this guy has a history of what you would call a serial rapist. They appear to be drugged. It doesn't take a genius to work that out. How many times did she was throwing up in her fucking mouth, for God's sake, and said
yeah,
no. Now, if you
right,
could skip all the bullshit, he's fucking guilty. But because of
exactly.
this quote unquote legal system, again, I'm going to sound like an idiot because I know nothing about it. And a lawyer
Mhm,
would be able to talk circles around me. So it sounds really naive for me to say, why can't we just call a spade a spade? And again, this is what Hubbard really taught us and drove home. If we get into a legal suit, is that the system really is set up with so many loopholes and so many things you can cast doubt in and blah blah blah, that you can't just call a spade, and you have to work really hard, it seems, just to actually get a conviction when someone's clearly guilty.
mhm.
Because if we didn't have to go through the mind games of casting doubt and, oh, you said this in 2017, but now you said this in 2022, and then
Mhm.
it's hard to get 12 people to agree on anything. So it's
It
like the whole, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah, because even before we got to know what was going on, all that pre-trial that was going on, I actually know about the pre-trial because I'm allowed to read the documents and everything that
mhm,
are there. And what was going on is that they're throwing things in and out. You're not allowed to, like, Scientology is the one to put the book of ethics in there as to why
mhm.
these women, they actually tried to use the fact that they were ex-Scientologists, that they couldn't even file charges on him because it's a violation of their contract of being a
Right.
Scientologist, and
Yeah.
that contract extends past you leaving, whether you leave or not, okay,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
you're not allowed to do it and this and that, and it can't be taken into thing, and they put
And
that
that's
book
been
in there.
upheld in court of law, by the way. They've,
It did.
how they actually put these people that are clearly out of Scientology. I think Claire Headley was one of them.
She
And they
is,
put
they're
them back
trying,
through the
yeah,
arbitration, which is
they're
obviously
trying.
completely rigged
But not for
to,
this one. They actually, the
yeah,
Supreme Court actually came back because they took it all the way
yeah,
up, all
yeah.
the way up. The judge was going, "No," and then the Superior Court of the state said, "No," and then they said, "Okay, Superior Court of the whole country, here we go." And they said, "No." They said, "No. Your religious belief in your contract has nothing to do about them filing a suit, a criminal
Right.
case against somebody. You
Right.
cannot hold a contract for any reason, religious or anything, that makes you make someone break the law.
Thank God they upheld that because they never have in the past. And as you just
Yeah.
mentioned, they had to take it all the way up to the Supreme
Because
Court.
they were afraid to address it as religion.
Yeah, exactly. It's that
Because
fucking
people
religious clause, Claire. That's
Mhm,
why they need to
mhm,
have their tax exempt status removed. They're
and they
running as a business. They're not a religion.
mhm,
They're a business for profit. And by the way, they made such a snaky illegal deal with Fred Goldberg of the IRS to manipulate them to get them to give their tax exempt status that the whole thing's
mhm,
fraudulent from the very beginning, but they don't have the balls to say that they made a mistake by caving into Scientology. So the whole thing's corrupt as fuck. And then no one wants to come out. Fred Goldberg doesn't want to save face and say, hey, I fucked up. Nobody wants to take them on because they, you know what Scientology does better than anything is they know how to
hmm,
buy people off and get, unless you have really strong moral compass and you can't give in for anything and, you have some strong faith, I guess, inside of you, anybody can be bought off for $10 more or less. So if you have blackmail material on them or, Fred Goldberg does his shady thing because he wants to save his
mhm,
own ass and how many lives did he destroy by giving Scientology
exactly.
the so
Mhm,
everybody's kind of complicit and everybody's kind of, not everybody, but let's just say there's a lot of shady people where everybody's scratching everybody's back. So one psychopath isn't going to throw another psychopath under the bus when they're all kind of benefiting by not putting Scientology on trial because, my crimes might come out too. You know, think about all the people that would have to be held to account just for giving them their tax exempt status. I mean, so
exactly.
it's just so frustrating.
Thankfully, some countries are actually doing that. They're working on them on whether they're a religion or not.
Some
They're
have,
actually
some, they're
pulling
banned in
away
some
from some,
countries too.
and I do hope that someone banned. They were banned in Australia, and then they got back. And like,
Yeah,
there's only
I know.
I looked at some stats, and I was very happy to report that it's only 131 claimed Scientologists in New Zealand.
Is that
Okay,
what it is?
yes, yes. There,
131.
there are only 1,076 people that will admit to being a Scientologist in the
Right.
UK census. Okay, so there you
Yeah,
go.
you're right.
All
It's
right,
not,
so these
yeah.
numbers are dwindling fastly. Other countries,
Mhm.
400, 300. They do the census and they won't
Yeah,
write the word. Now, does that mean they're
right.
not might not be more? Yeah, they might. They might not just be
Probably not a
broken down.
lot, though. I think
But
they're
but
fairly
yeah,
accurate. That's
but
probably a
they,
good idea.
but the Aussies did kick them right out of the
Yeah.
country. They're back now under
Yeah,
different
I know.
restrictions, but it's not very comfortable for them over there. Go Australia, teach us, please. I want this over here too. I don't want it
Right.
comfortable for them to cause
It
damage. I
shouldn't
want
be
them to do what they
comfortable.
want. You know what? They have a right to organize,
Mhm.
create a culture if they do. But when you cause damage and you mess with the legacy, when
Yeah.
you think you're above the legal
Yes.
system on
There you
where
go.
you are hanging your hat, there's something wrong there. Okay. And I don't care if you're a
Mhm.
religion or an organization. You could be the damn Boy Scouts. Okay. I
Mhm.
don't care.
Mhm.
But when you are hanging your hat here in America and decide you don't have to follow the rules and the laws here, that's a problem. And that's what's got to stop. Like you
And
need to
that's the
be
only
able to do
problem
better.
that I think me and you would agree on that they have. They should be able to people should have as much free will, in my opinion, to practice and believe whatever the hell they want. It only
Mhm.
crosses the line when it gets into illegality
It does. And or
or
I
abuse, or I
I
would even take,
yeah,
yeah.
I would say
E
oppression and abuse. Like it's second class
Mhm.
citizenship stuff really annoys me.
Oh,
I do,
yes.
but because I'm a woman, of course I have a feeling about certain groups that think that that's secondary citizen class right there. When I want to remind you that the word men is in women, but women isn't in men. Let's just
That's
remind you of
funny.
that. That actually, we when we are all together as one, it is a better, stronger thing.
Mhm.
Like, you're shorter, littler, and only three letters without us. Just remember that. Just remember that. Okay, because you'll do better with this than you would without us. Because you want to get
Right.
into all this stuff about procreation and what's our need. You really think I want to do any of that with you when you talk like that? What? If
Mhm.
that's really what you believe, then do better. Do better. Because as an equal, you will get that done. As this second class citizen, only fear and abuse is going to get that done. That's the way it is. That's
Men
not
are
wrong.
in women, Clearview 2023 from the Rocket
Mm-hmm.
Couch. Yeah,
Oh,
I'm gonna have
stop.
to write
I
that one
don't
down.
mean that like a sexual thing, Rocket Cat.
No, he's just giving you credit for your new meme that you just created.
Yeah,
That was cool.
no, 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 it's actually something I got off Twitter. I don't even know who made
Oh,
it, but
all right.
they actually put the word women and men and with in several different versions of it. He and she, he is in the word she too.
Yeah.
Okay,
Which
so
means we should all be one and get along and not fight amongst our petty goddamn differences, but we can't.
basically that we all know it's a given that when it is together, it works better than against.
Absolutely.
Okay, and that one doesn't have to be above the other for it to work the right
Exactly.
way. Okay, because when it's combined appropriately into the full word, it is a stronger element. And I truly believe that it's fear that makes a lot of this legislation coming
Yeah.
forward, because
Yep.
women are having a stronger voice. They see, if people say, "Oh, I will listen to Claire. She's such a strong, woman, and this and that." All of a sudden, I get all these people on me like, "Who? What are you trying to convince us? Why are you trying to do this? You're a
Right.
man hater." I said, "I am not a man hater. All of them am a man lover. No way am I a man hater. Okay, no way am I saying that. Am I an asshole hater? Yeah. Am I an abuser hater? Yeah. Am
Yeah.
I an entitled MF thinks he can do whatever he want hater? Probably so. Yes, most definitely. But not a man hater. Mm-mm, mm-mm, not at all. But on
Eh,
that, I think we're done.
okay. And as a man, I just wanted to say thank you for not hating me, Claire. I
I don't
appreciate it.
hate you at all. Gosh,
I never
dog,
got that
like,
feeling even
no,
slightly.
no, no. I'm actually a fan. Actually, I hope you know that. I hope we can
Oh,
do some
thanks.
more of this.
I'm a fan of
But
yours too.
I
I'm
think it's great what you're doing out there. And just to remind
you as
everybody,
well.
he's linked in my other stream, but I will amend this because he was here to have all his contact information there too. And if you haven't gone check it out, go check out his channel. There's some really interesting, good stuff about what it was like, how you can deal with it and get through. And I know some of you are really interested in it, like I am, and you want to know more, and you're going to find it over there. As well as, and we're going to shout out Tony and Chris again too.
Mhm.
Tony, if you ever listen, I know you're probably too busy to hear me, but if anybody ever tells you, I'll shout you out all the time. You are amazing. No one would know what's going on without
Yeah,
you. You
that's
were
true.
so straightforward and you did your best not to be biased, but I do appreciate it's hard not to be biased if you've
He
been
walked
dealing
that
with them.
line pretty goddamn
He
good. I was
did
impressed with that,
for
I gotta tell
somebody
you.
that's been doing legal and
Yeah, and
reporting
he's
on
on for
Scientology for
20
20
fucking
years.
years. He
He
walked that
gets the
line
gold
so
star.
well.
He did.
Absolutely.
He was a star just like Judge Almeida, who tried her best to keep it even. I applaud her too.
Yeah,
But definitely check out Tony Ortega, Chris Shelton, Doug Scott Kramer, and several others if you want to know more about this. This isn't going to end. There is so
I
much
know.
more going on with Scientology, and I'll be speaking on it. And you're going to hear from me, Doug, because we're going to do more. There's
Hey,
so
I
much
would
more to
love
do.
to. And you know what, Claire? When the day comes where we can't talk about this because it's gone, I would actually much prefer that than us talking because we're gonna be,
True.
you know, I we're
You're
gonna
talking
I
about,
don't I
you look
hope we're
forward
not
to the
talking
day.
about Scientology in 100 years from now. You know
No,
what I mean? I
yeah,
just hope there's
yeah,
one day where these conversations won't need to happen ever again.
true. I like that idea. I look
You know
forward
what I
to
mean?
being able to contact you and say, "Hey, do you want to come over and discuss
Yeah.
pizza
Hey,
and
let's
chocolate
not talk
mousse?"
about Scientology
We're gonna
because it
talk
doesn't exist
pizza,
anymore. Let's talk
chocolate
about yeah.
mousse, and
Let's
what's
talk
the
about
best
anything
flour
else.
to use,
Yeah.
like anything else, like food, something, like anything else but that. But yeah, for
Yeah.
right now, it just needs to, because it
Yeah.
needs to. And in
Exactly.
cults in general,
Mhm.
which is
Not just
more,
Scientology, because,
right.
this is just a minor thing. I can relate to, if you're trying to break away from your Mormon family, they would relate to and Jehovah's Witnesses. It's just like it's a pattern and it's Scientology, will go at some point, but then another cult and another belief system will continue on. So it's breaking the pattern, not just Scientology. And also, you know what, Claire? You know
Mhm.
what I kind of like trying to pattern the channel around is it, this brings us back to the very first words that we had when we started this conversation in the last podcast. And
Mhm.
that was Scientology is a great model to use to figure out what not to do going forward. So to me, it's
Exactly.
just a pattern of abuse to be studied so that we can learn from our mistakes and not just prevent Scientology abuses. And people will always probably be, Scientologists even after, their tax exempt status is taken away one day. But to break the overall pattern of abuse is what I'm really interested in, because Scientology is just another little, as much damage as it causes, it's just a microcosm of the macrocosm.
Exactly. Mm, I agree. That I can stand behind 100%. Oh,
Amen. And I'm not
Mm.
even religious, but let us
Mm.
give thanks.
No, you don't have to. You could be grateful and thankful without
Grateful.
religion. Believe
Yes,
me, I am
exactly.
every damn day. Small
I feel
blessings, silver
you.
licenings, looking for them all
Mhm.
the time. They're
Me
there.
too.
They're definitely there. I don't need God for that.
Well
But
said.
anyway,
Well
um,
said.
on that, come back. I hope to see you soon. I'm going to be looking forward to what you're doing over there, and I hope we can have more
Vice
great
versa, my friend.
conversations. My chat loves you. They're going to keep
I was
at
just
me
gonna
until
say,
you
thanks
come
for the
back.
cool people in the chat. You have a really
Mhm.
good group of people.
They are. They make this easy for me. They really do. Some of them really get me, and
Mhm.
yep.
Cl
And I'm
Claire
just happy they're with it.
Claire, I just started doing live streams, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks ago, starting with Aaron, and I freaking love it because the people are so supportive,
They are
and
so
I wonder
cool.
if they realize how much it actually means just to show up in a chat and just you can't do any of this without support from
I know.
people.
I try to
Mhm.
tell them each time. I thank them at the end of everyone for their contributions, for being here,
We rule,
for making
exactly.
it, actually, because without it, it's not a conversation. Like sometimes when I'm doing
Yeah.
legal, I'm up here by myself and
Mhm.
they actually contribute to where, I want to do what they want to hear, the questions they want
Mhm.
answered so they can make up their own
Exactly.
mind. So I
Exactly.
love it. I can't wait till you do a live. I will hop over there in that chat and have some fun over there with you. That'd
I
be
think
cool.
we'll be doing one. I'll be doing a bunch of them in the future. I got some
Okay,
guests
cool.
lined up or whatever. But I
Yeah.
got to tell you, Claire, it's kind of nerve-wracking doing the first one because it's like shit, man. There's no editing. There, it goes out and that's it. Permanent.
Dude, you just lived for 5.5 hours with me.
That's
5 hours and
crazy. You
45
just
minutes.
broke me in today, Claire. I feel like a fucking professional
That's
now.
my thing on YouTube. They will tell you, I break people's YouTube
I
cherries all the
feel
time up here.
officially initiated into your not cult, but whatever you did. This Jedi mind trick that you performed on me today
Mm,
by getting me used
it's
to
called
lives. I
mm,
appreciate it.
I just have a library where people just like to get together and learn together and be together and without judgment. That's all it is. And I'm
Awesome.
happy to have you be a part of it.
Thank
So,
you. I'm happy to
yeah.
to have met you, Claire. I really appreciate you having me on just to chat.
It is. It was a great conversation. And now I'm going to kick you so you can get some rest and have a good meal and rest
Thank
up
you.
for what you got to do on your channel. And I really hope to see you again soon. I'll be I'll be in your DMs or your email rather.
Please do. Don't be a
I will.
stranger.
I won't. And
All right.
keep doing what you're doing because
You
you're
as
doing good
well.
things. All
And have a
right.
very good night, young lady.
All right.
Bye.
Good night, Doug.
Good night, my
Good
friend.
night.
Bye.